Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
I haven't spoken up here since I could hear myself. Hopefully everyone can hear me much better this time. Good morning. I'm so glad to be back. I was sitting there and thinking I've been gone for so many weeks in a row. How unusual to share the message when I get back, but I'm excited to be here. Today I'm going to start us out, probably unsurprisingly at this point, by reading a passage of scripture, and I do want to say it's a little unusual. It is from Mark, who I love, but this is one of the stories when I was a kid that I would hear and be like, what the heck is that? So it will fit in really well, but I do want to tell you that before we start reading. So we're going to read from Mark 9, beginning with verse 14 and going to verse 29. This happens right after the first part of Mark 9 is the transfiguration and Jesus on the mountain and all that. So, when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and some scribes arguing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe, and they ran forward to greet him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak. And whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." He answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. When the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you are able," I think that's so cool. He turns it around. He says, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." Immediately, the father of the child cried out, "I believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he was able to stand. When he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast him out?" And he said, "This kind can come out only through prayer." Now, though we don't traditionally observe days as friends, I've been reflecting on both days that hold meaning to many of us here and our communities, and the memories that they stir within us as I prepare today's message. One of them coincides with the Obamas, as mentioned earlier, but this week, many across our nation commemorated Juneteenth with family and friends. As I watched the posts online, saw the joyful celebrations, and read through reflections on our own current world, I found myself holding little Beulah, that's the theme, okay? Little Beulah very close. In the past few months, I have been more aware of my inner child than usual. I've been learning that when I need to fight, she is who I need most. As long as I can remember, fighting has been difficult for me. Now, as a friend, I've learned that there are complex ethics to fighting and all kinds of nuances of what that looks like. As a historian, I learned in college that the contextualization of fighting is crucial. And as a divinity student, I'm continuously reminded that fighting is a vulnerable and formative consequence of ruptures both within and without. But as a little kid, long before I began to understand nuances and what fighting even was, I knew it did not come easy for me, as it did some of my siblings. Very easy. Now, while this may not be relatable to each of you here today, I know some of you very close, if you'll humor me for a moment, I want to kind of spiral through my own experiences of this and then bring us back to the rather startling text that we just read together. I can argue When I say I'm not good at fighting, that's not what I mean. Quite well if I've had a full night's sleep and know that I'm right. I can resist. I can articulate and reimagine pathways for a more whole future. I can even stand up for others and use my voice in the face of injustice. But no matter if you've known me since I was very, very small or you just met me recently, you've probably noticed I'm stubborn, but I'm not good at getting the fight done. I'll stand right beside those who do fight, unflinching, and I'll speak up and say what is right. But when asked to fight for myself, or defend myself, or fight ethically for what I need, even in a survival situation for my literal existence, I barely know how. This may sound like a dream come true for a Quaker committed to anti-violence and peacemaking. But as friends know all too well, the work of peace, community, and ultimately justice is a daily commitment to fight. In our contemporary world, where most have been or are currently in therapy, and psychology language has inundated our relationships and our algorithms, the term inner child gets thrown around a lot. I am quite certain, beside the basics, that our inner child holds spiritual meaning for each of us in unique ways in our own journey. I've been caring for little Beulah and praying that with time, way will open to fight with the certainty that the reality she's known from childhood can be made new. Learning new ways forward takes dedication and commitment and long beyond our numbered years here on earth. Today, I want to invite you to wonder at the story we've just read together with our inner children. I want to share a bit of my younger self through this prepared message with both belief and unbelief, certainty and uncertainty. As I prepared for today, I found myself returning to the hymns of my childhood. Both the selections today were among my top favorites when I was a little kid. The tunes remain with me, the words remain with me, even as the meanings have shifted or changed with me over the years. Even songs I haven't heard in 20 years will surface when anxiety or grief starts to come into my soul. I find myself humming old hymns when navigating traffic or trying to sit with friends over a grave at my home meeting. Different tunes come at different times, and often there seems to be little connection to the lyrics, but that song itself is grounding me in the circumstances. And they remind me every single time that since childhood, I have believed. Either way, as I interrogated this thread of childhood, remembering Juneteenth and today, which is Father's Day, I thought of Jesus' own childhood. I thought of early friends seeking out who could speak to their condition. I thought of the prophets and freedom fighters who paved the way forward through abolition and civil rights. And I landed on one of my favorite memories. If you go to school with me, you're not surprised, that Howard Thurman shares from his childhood. The moment is when he's experiencing grief and loss at his grandfather's funeral, and he questions why religion even matters. It is at his grandfather's funeral, who was a Baptist preacher, that he vowed to leave his certainty behind, and at the time thought that that would mean God as well. And he wanted to question everything that he had been given to believe. He asked, what does faith have to say when life is difficult? In his portrayal of his story, he talks about like standing by a tree and asking the tree these questions. What does religion have to say to people whose backs are up against the wall? Then, now, continuously what seems like forever. Childhood Thurman asked these questions as the grieving grandchild of a Black Baptist preacher growing up in the Jim Crow South. This wasn't the theologian or the activist we would remember him to be now. Since childhood, he watched forms of Christianity flourish that could preach salvation while remaining silent about segregation, violence, and oppression. He saw the dissonance with the eyes of a child, and he wondered, what good is all of this? And what good is my faith if I have nothing to offer those exhausted people around me or myself? These questions lead us back to Scripture this morning. To me, Mark 9 is not a story about triumphant faith. It is a story about exhausted faith, a faith fought long and hard for. Our passage occurs immediately after the Transfiguration, and Jesus has come down from the mountain. Peter and James and John have witnessed this moment of divine glory. I can only imagine it was quite magical. Moses and Elijah. My printing just got messed me up. 1 second. That's silly. Well, here we go. Moses and Elijah up on that mountain and all of this magical change that's happening, right? But then Jesus comes down from the mountain. There's fighting, there's confusion, there's suffering, and an exasperated father. When Jesus asks how long the child has suffered, the father answers, from childhood. 2 words. How many of us would have to answer if Jesus asked us, how long have you suffered? An entire history, years of fear, years of worry, generations of trying to stay alive, years of hoping for healing and finding disappointment instead. How long have we suffered? How many generations have answered since childhood? Not just now, not just Thurman, not just Christ and this child. Not just those who waited so very long for the freedom of Juneteenth. Since childhood, we have imagined a better world. Since childhood, we have wondered and questioned, and yet our suffering continues. The father had already sought help. I imagine, just as little Beulah imagines, that how many times this man must have gone to try to get help for his son. He fought for his child. He fought for his family. And I know as someone who has given care for someone they love, he was also fighting for himself. Imagine how it felt to wake up and hear that another miracle-working man had come to town, and everyone was so excited. How embarrassing to bring his child out in public again in front of his neighbors and explain to the child that they needed to get ready and go try one more thing. Then they get to this miraculous Jesus, right, who's just had this beautiful moment on the mountain. And then his disciples say they can help. This community around Christ surely is good enough. Surely they can help. Perhaps they can speak to his condition. You wait, you watch as they try to heal him. Nothing's working, and your child only worsens. It would have been better to stay at home. How many times in fighting do we try and try and try again, and it would just be better to stay home? Mustering up the courage to ask for help, even to ask friends to hold you in the light, to push out our embarrassment, to live into braver community values that we say we believe, to ask for the healing that comes through justice, reconciliation, and just being together. The disciples have now failed him too. He was so close, fighting without relief again, and he asked his community, and again they failed. And yet he shows up, and he stays. Not because he's certain, not because he's optimistic. He says he believes, help my unbelief. That does not sound like a man with much optimism to me. Not because he has some unwavering confidence that everything will work out, but he loves his son enough to fight one more day. He shows up again, he fights again, and he loves his child enough, his family, his home, that he'll try again at this new wonder worker that's come to town. He spent his life and his child's life fighting with no reward. I've long found the doctrines of certainty to be shallow and wanting. My father will say as a young child, the most of my questions were about, this doesn't make, how do you know? How do you know? Why? This does not make sense. My questions and those around me are holy. The questions in this room that friends have raised, I cannot imagine God gave us our questions, our wonder, our imagination. Let us grow to be children in this world only to require us to lay them down. Our doubts and our beliefs are part of us. The father arrives with honesty, childlike and desperate. When prompted if he believes, he responds with one of my most beloved prayers in all of Scripture. I believe this is a testimony, his life speaking as he says, I believe, help my unbelief. Such a beautiful response, one that's mirrored in my own soul as a child and to this day. In this moment, in the lives and testimonies of so many believers and friends who've come before us, faith and uncertainty have existed together. For Howard Thurman and those who fought for civil rights, all the way back to fighting for abolition and waiting 2 whole years to even hear. Jesus receives these questions, he receives the boy, and the father does not need to become less human or more mature. He doesn't need to trade in his childlike joy and his toys to receive his job and his fancy diploma and become an adult. Jesus comes to him tired and fighting and knows this long inheritance that he's trying to give his child. We're tired. Pride was last weekend. I was grateful to be there as always, but I was so tired. And I kept looking at the people in the parade and I was like, we're so tired, right? And in Juneteenth, there is so much joy, but friends are tired. We're tired of violence. We're tired of our pain. We're tired of systems that fail us no matter how vulnerable and how many times we show up and imagine a better world. We're tired of seeing suffering repeated generation after generation across our world. We are tired of liberation long delayed and long overdue. Juneteenth reminds us that justice is delayed does not mean justice is denied. It's just still delayed. We wait, we fight since childhood. When we sing these songs together, childhood Beulah would have told you that my life would preach of this beautiful world. This is our Father's world, and it was just going to be magical and perfect. You know, it was like going to be like a Disney movie, but like the Jesus version. Grown up, Beulah would tell you, when I sing those songs now, my heart is heavy because that's not the world I see. That's not the God I thought was there. And I almost stood here today and talked about fighting the good fight and holding the grief and giving our lives just as our ancestors did before us, generation after generation doing the work of liberation. But that's not authentic for me today, and I know for many of us. We're here, we're fighting as long as it takes. But the fighting Quakers, which there's a few in the room, the fighting Quakers know that that is not something that remains the same. The songs remain the same, our hymns. We change, God changes. And together, as we continue to change and continue to grow, all of our inner children are with us. When we sit in open worship, there is that wonder within us, no matter if it's been 90 years or we're still kids. And since childhood does not have to mean that we go home without justice and without healing. Today, singing together these songs is my signifies that I am held. We sing that song together, and that was for me as much as you. I believe, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to fight and find a way to do it stronger and better. But I'll also ask you, and I ask the divine, to help my unbelief. So thank you, friends, for singing my beloved hymns together with me today. And I love you all dearly. Let's keep fighting.